Unintended consequences. That's what you call it when things don't really work out like you planned. And that's what we're talking about on this episode of the Driving with Rob podcast. No matter how meticulous you are in the planning stages, something always happens. Life happens. You think you got it all figured out, you think you got it all planned out to the nth detail, and then you have unintended consequences. Stuff happens. Sometimes your unintended consequences means that something went horribly wrong. And there was a little bit of chill in the air this morning, and I started to remember how a few years ago, when we had this pretty serious round of sleet, freezing rain, a lot of limbs came down, a lot of trees came down, and a lot of people lost power. Well, there was this guy that I heard about on the news. Because he had electric heat and no fireplace in the house, no kerosene heaters, no other way to make heat, he decided to bring his charcoal grill in the house for heat. And I don't remember exactly. I don't think it was everybody in the house. But I think a couple of people died from smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide poisoning. All he wanted to do was heat his house, and something went horribly wrong. And that was an unintended consequence. We've all gotten caught in slow-moving traffic. And the longer you stayed behind a slower car, the more antsy and frustrated you got. So the first chance you had to pass that car, you pulled out to pass. All you wanted to do was get around that slow car. And we've all heard the stories of people trying to pass in a blind spot and had a head-on collision with another car coming in the other direction. All you intended to do was go around that slow-moving car and ended up in a traffic accident, maybe a serious accident, maybe that person lost their life as an unintended consequence. And how many times have you had an unintended consequence happen to you? And then later somebody said to you, "What were you thinking?" I didn't really think it through. And that's the reason we tell young people all the time, your actions have consequences. And a lot of times young people just don't have enough life experience to realize how wrong a situation can go. You know, the old anecdote, "Hold my beer." Hey, y'all, watch this. A lot of times results in unexpected, unintended consequences. If you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. I cut my leg with a chainsaw one time. I didn't intend to cut my leg with a chainsaw. 13 internal stitches, 11 external stitches. And that running chainsaw touched my leg for a split second. And I had an unintended consequence. But unintended consequences kind of lead you to believe that something bad happened. But sometimes you have good unintended consequences. The landscape artist Bob Ross, you know, the happy little trees guy, is famous for saying, "There are no mistakes, only happy accidents." Sometimes the mistakes, the happy accidents, the unintended consequences are the most memorable. How many times have you watched somebody's wedding video, and the most entertaining, interesting part of the video is when the little 4-year-old flower girl stopped halfway down the aisle because she dropped something or forgot something. Or she stopped and started talking to people in the audience, went over and got on Papa's lap. That's the part of the video you remember. But she was supposed to just walk down the aisle dropping flower petals and stand where she was supposed to stand. But something happened, something changed. Something didn't go according to plan. It was an unintended consequence that ended up being the highlight of your wedding video. YouTube is full of blooper videos of your favorite TV shows. And quite often it's the mistakes that ended up being funnier than the show itself. And sometimes the outtake was so good, they left it in. But it wasn't planned. It was an unintended consequence. I had this girlfriend in high school, and we dated for a couple of years. Well, her sister had a friend who was over at their house at least as often as I was over there. And it wasn't unusual for the four of us to go out for pizza or end up doing things together as a group. And back in those days, it was not unusual for me to flirt with a pretty girl. And after all these years, not a lot has changed. But anyway, I used to flirt with my girlfriend's sister's friend. And it was innocent and playful. But I got to know her and I liked her and she was funny and fun to be around. Well, as a lot of high school romances do, my girlfriend and I broke up, went our separate ways. Well, about a year or so after we broke up, I went with a friend of mine to do what we used to refer to as cruising the court square, where you make endless loops around the courthouse, going about 10 miles an hour. And it was primarily teenagers. And you would wave at people as you passed each other, going up Main Street. And if they waved back, you made another loop. And when you saw them again, you would say, "Meet me at Hardee's." And you would meet up in the Hardee's parking lot or the Pizza Hut parking lot or wherever you decided to meet. So you could talk and get to know each other better. Well, as it turned out, I saw my ex-girlfriend's sister's friend. And I said, "Meet us at Hardee's." And the next night, we had our first date. We went out on our first date in December of 1981. And we're married 6 years later. And I have been married to this girl for 32 years. We have 5 kids. And even though I never saw it coming, never made any plans, she became my greatest and happiest unintended consequence. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. And just remember, things don't always go according to plan, and sometimes it's the best thing that ever happened to you. Click on subscribe, click on follow. And again, thanks for listening. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.